Hello everybody, welcome to It Was Tuesday, and yes, you'll notice there's only one topic on hand right here because I keep skipping it the past 2 weeks. I kept saying I wanted to read this and talk about this. It's just because it's a really interesting story about, how a lot of the game industry goes. Harada talks about a lot of very interesting things, including, changing in the gaming environment and stuff. And it's a really interesting interview. So I want to go through it. I've glanced through it. I've basically sped read it before. So I have a few thoughts here and there, but, I kind of intentionally tried not to process it too much. I have this weird ability that if I want to forget something, I can make myself forget something. It's really weird. We are going to watch this here. We're going to take a look at this. I read this here, and like I said, I'm going to go through this. So basically, to give a little bit of a backstory that's been going on here. That's right. Braum was announced. Yeah. That one's a weird one for me because, I was so glad that, the voice director told us that in Street Fighter 6 they decided for Zangief to take away all the, the stereotypical Russian accent stuff, like skipping the word the and a, so if you're familiar with trying to do fake Russian accents, you skip the articles because in Russian, they don't have articles in their language, right? So that's why as soon as you say something like, I take bus to train station, like that immediately sounds like a Russian accent because they don't ever say, I took the bus to the train station, or I grab a pencil to write the notes down. I take pencil, write notes down, like that. So they took away that stuff. They made Zangief talk actually normal, just with the accent. And so when Braum actually showed up and he has the very, very stereotypical Russian accent, I was like, oh, that's kind of a shame. It's kind of a shame. But yeah, and I don't know any of the characters either, so I don't know anything about it. So I have no association with that character whatsoever. But the way that this all started was Jason Montoya here, they call me Monty, basically was talking about Soul Calibur here. And so basically he says if Soul Calibur 2 had a director as loyal, or better said long-term, as Harada Tekken was for Tekken, then SE2 would have grown into unseen levels of success for the series. The sales have declined over the series because of so much changes, and they lose old mechanics, introduce new ones. A lost defensive mechanic, push block away or towards opponent, was lost. Sad to see gone. Change is needed, but the soul of the game needs to stay the same, like Harada has done so well for Tekken. With the success of Tekken 8, I'm sure we'll see a new entry into the Calibur series, but what kind of entry will it be? A suggestion to the Bandai Namco SEA team: use SE2 as the template, use Soul Calibur 2 as a template, add in aspects of Heat Rage Art's SE6 aspects, bring back lost mechanics. However, be measured in this, as Soul Calibur over time became too Tekken-like, as in recovery from attacks was too large, should keep recovery fast, as that is what guard impacts were for, to slow down an opponent offense. Want to attract younger audience. Anime here and across the globe is very liked. Guest characters are key, but not just one. A few provide many over time. The soul still burns. And it's really interesting because already from my standpoint here, this original message, it feels like, I don't know what this guy's role is. I don't know what he does. Okay, so he's just an old school FGC guy. I don't know if he has any game creation history or whatever like that. When you make new games, already from my standpoint, this is not a good way to make a game, essentially. Especially because times change, tastes change, things are very different. For example, when Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 was at EVO, a lot of the people who weren't familiar with that game, who only came in during Street Fighter 5 and 6, the chat was watching it and they're like, what is this garbage game? Does anyone play neutral at all? Nothing's happening. It's just infinite combos and everything looks impossible to block. How do you guys enjoy this? Tastes and stuff change over time. and it's very difficult. So, Soul Calibur 2 sold really well because, one, Soul Calibur 1 on the home system was absolutely fantastic, had amazing one-player content, had one of the first perfect ratings at Gamist magazine, etc., etc. And so Soul Calibur 2 kind of rode on the coattails of that, and also was just an absolutely beautiful looking game. And so a lot of people really appreciate, and have this love for Soul Calibur 2. Kind of connected to before I started the stream, I was talking about how people have nostalgia glasses for everything. But, if today we got everybody to go play Soul Calibur 2, would we get the same reception? I don't know. I really don't know. And the hardest thing about this now is that, the thing that I have talked about a million times is the difference between fighting games now and then, is that fighting games then cost you 25 to 50 cents to play. So you saw a Soul Calibur or a Soul Calibur 2 in the arcade, you plopped in a couple of quarters and you're like, this game's sick. I like this game. So you could buy it at home and you go play it at home, you're having a lot of fun or whatever like that. Today, it costs you $60 to play a game, and then you got to buy the $20 season pass, or $70 for the game and the $20 season pass. So now you spent $90, right? And so, the things that you made happen in older games, like, for example, Soul Calibur 2 had far less ring out protection. Like, everything just wrung you out. Like, literally in Soul Calibur 6, only certain moves can ring you out. Like, no matter how a move hits you, if it's not deemed to be a move that can ring you out, it can't ring you out, right? And so the reason this happens and the reason why everyone's mad about dumbing down of fighting games is because we're creating fighting games for a console generation now. We're not making fighting games for an arcade generation. You see this a lot from the KOF players who are mad. They're like, why are you so scared to play 3 characters? That was the draw back in the arcade days. And I'm like, yeah, it cost you 25 cents to try 3 characters. And if some asshole who was an expert came up there and challenged you and beat the shit out of you, you spent 25 cents and you could just walk away. Are you going to spend $90 to play KOF 15 to find out, to see, because of the appeal of playing 3 characters, which you can't even take online because it's so hard to get good at? Dude, it's a completely different world out there. It's so different now, right? Which is why I've suggested in KOF, like, let's pretend gold is we'll use Street Fighter 6's rank system. So before gold, you could only play 1 character. The game is 1v1 online. It's just standard 2 out of 3 rounds, 1v1, and you play that until you get to gold with that character, and then you can't play that character in ranked anymore. Now you have to switch to another character and play them and get them to gold, and then you have to play a 3rd character and get them to gold, and then with 3 characters in gold, you can now finally start playing gold ranks. And so basically round 1 will be, the short bar with, only so many stocks. Round 2, you get more stocks, etc. So you can also play with the idea of learning how to use your character in all 3 positions. And once you do that, once you've mastered 3 characters, the gold, now you can actually play the 3 online, right? Because what happens a lot of the times is, if you fight somebody who knows what they're doing, like, you just basically never get to play. So I think that was kind of a problem, right? So, that's the difference right now, is that we are living in a console era. We aren't doing the same. And so, like, the best thing Grand Blue's done is just had a free version out there to play all the time. And I think that might be the key for a lot of fighting games. Just have a very free but limited edition out there. Don't worry about free to play and getting people to do it. Like, literally, there's just a free version that's limited, and then if you want to keep playing it, just buy the game. Like, Grand Blue isn't trying to do a free to play model. They're just, here's a demo, a permanent demo that you can play, and anytime you want to buy the real one, let's go. But you can play the demo version online and stuff. You just don't have choice of characters to use, etc., etc. And I think that's a pretty decent model. So, again, just saying all this, that I can already see, this guy obviously on his profile here, talks about 1991, etc., very much an old school fighting game head. And like I said, it's very interesting because I'm old school as well, yet somehow, I just have this ability to let go of that past and realize when things are better now or why everything is different now than it was before. I don't want to get stuck in that kind of nostalgia glasses that a lot of people get stuck in. So already just by looking at this post, I can kind of see some downsides to this. But, bless Harada, he's been doing this a lot recently. He's been having like novels. Like he is spending all of his time on Twitter right now these days. I swear to God. Like he is just here constantly writing some of these really long posts, but they also have a lot of really good information here. So again, I've glanced through this. I've probably missed a lot of very key points. But what I'm going to do is read this to you guys over here. And every time I kind of want to add something in here, I'll stop it and add to it, basically. You build a game with the intent of creating new fans. Absolutely, King9999. You can't worry about trying to please the people that were there. All right. Yeah, Harada's, Little Akiba Game says the fact that Harada is speaking so openly as a high roller at a major Japanese corporation is crazy. Again, Harada has really been getting a very Western mindset. I don't know if we could thank Michael Murray for that, or Markman, or Tasty Steve, or Rip, or whatever. But I mean, even the round tables that were ran by Harada, are like ridiculous. Like you're literally having a round table from multiple companies all talking about fighting games and letting them all admit how much they love each other's game and stuff like that. And like, that just wasn't a thing in the past, like Japanese companies never did that. So Harada, he's really pushing a lot of boundaries and stuff. And it's good. It's good. I really like that, honestly. So I'm just picturing a whole bunch of suits in the executive suites collectively clenching at the side of this tweet. Oh, seriously. Well, let's read this because, like I said, I only caught a gist of it. Let's go through this whole entire thing over here. If you guys want to stop me while I'm reading to add a point, make sure you type @JChenzor in the chat, or use that little thing to highlight your message. There's that highlight your message effect if you've been on the stream enough, I think. Highlight my message, so you can use that with the little points that you gain. And so, obviously a lot of people who have been here a lot have definitely have a lot of points and stuff. I mean, Harada has that Harada's Bar, King9999, which kind of is a blog, but he just brings a guest on all the time. I haven't watched a lot of those yet, so I don't know what's going on in any of those, unfortunately. But let's start here because I've been putting this off long enough. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Since it's lunchtime, let's talk a little bit about the differences between Soul Calibur, Project Soul, and Tekken Project. Before we get to that subject, you mentioned game mechanics as a prime example of how to talk about the survival of a game. But things are not that simple. In the case of fighting games, if the arcade game market was in its heyday and the income of 1 coin per play was important, here we go, was important, it was still the case. But in the home video game market, the only people who can reach an evaluation of game mechanics are those who have already purchased the game. And the paradigm shift in the business model of games has changed the marketing of games itself. So boom, right away, I remember him talking about this a little bit, which is why I mentioned it myself. Exactly. We're in a different market now. We're in a different world where we have to get people to play fighting games differently than we used to get people to play fighting games, right? Now, because you're spending $60, you need the value. Back in the day when I was talking about fighting game Dark Ages before the stream started, with you guys over here, literally, if you did release a fighting game on a console and all it had was cheesy arcade mode, versus mode, and like that was it, like some really bad story mode, you're like, whatever, cool, it didn't really matter as much. But nowadays, if you're going to spend $60 on a game, you want to make that worth it. I also mentioned Soul Calibur 1 being one of the best selling Soul Calibur games of all time, and people loved it because they also had a lot of great one-player content in that game. So the console version was rated very highly. In fact, I think more people talked about the console version of Soul Calibur than the arcade Soul Calibur. And let me tell you, I know so many people who have gotten into the FGC or started learning fighting games via Soul Calibur because Soul Calibur 1 and Soul Calibur 2 were so popular. So yeah, he has Michael Murray and Twitter. Yeah, for sure. Twitter is definitely changing his mind. I mean, the fact that we're even talking about Waffle House is actually pretty crazy. Keeping these simples is always good. Yep, too many mechanics turn people off. Or at least you gotta have a good way to onboard people with the mechanics. It's too hard to just market your game through the sea of titles out there. That is another big important one that I've talked about many times, Necromancy Black. And so I'll repeat that as well. Necromancy Black says that I see more and more indie games putting out demos because it's too hard to just market your game through the sea of titles out there. That was the other thing too, is that before when we had EGMs and all these magazines, like literally they would, here's the upcoming games, here's preview of games. And you know what? They would cover probably the majority of the games out there that you could possibly play. Like one of my friends a long time ago was always like, I wish I could play every video game out there. And nowadays, it's like there's more games on the Switch store than there have been on every other Nintendo console combined. There's too much stuff out there. So you can't just be like, you know what, if you couldn't hack this fighting game, you're weak and you should. No, there's like 700,000 other video games that you could play and actually have fun. Instead of suffering through fighting games just to be able to say, I can do good against you so-and-so, right? Like, we're not doing a good job making fighting games fun to learn, which is why I've always said, I think ranked sucks. Just brings me back again to group ranked. Please, let's do group rank. Because it's a social genre. It's a social genre. All right, anyways, let's see here. The paradigm shift in the business model of games has changed marketing itself in games. In other words, the world of marketing has changed to a world where the question is how to create a situation where people want to buy a game before they play it, and they do buy it, and how to increase the pre-release evaluation and the number of initial sales. Yeah, so this is important too. This is why pre-orders and stuff like that are so prevalent in the game industry, is because they use it to measure the eagerness of people to play games and stuff. It's kind of a marketing tactic themselves to know where they're at by putting everything on pre-orders. A lot of people have said don't pre-order games until they come out, because that way you'll make sure you get a good game, etc., etc. And there's a lot of that for sure. There's a lot of that concept for sure. Okay, so Harada announced the roundtable tomorrow for Lydia Talk. Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Someone suggested that Harada write a book, and I think it's a good idea. There are a few books on Japanese game dev. I only know about 3 of them, and I have them all. Oh, dang, that's crazy. Okay. Huh. Okay, I'm only going to stop at the end of paragraphs, so it's easier for me to know where I stopped. In talking about historical video game franchises, the shift in marketing and branding due to the paradigm shift in business models cannot be overlooked. And many people who have been in the industry for a long time will probably agree with my simple explanation. On top of that, of course, it is important to evaluate game mechanics. It is important to have game mechanics that can be played for a long time, because it is a factor that affects the sales beat after the initial launch, and it is a factor that will work like a body blow in the long run. Now, this is important too, because I've said this before, like back on the NES days, when you made a brand new game, you made a game, and if it was successful or not, you're like, cool. And then when you made another game, you just basically made a brand new game from scratch. The problem with video games these days is it costs so much money to make a game these days. Holy crap, if you're not an indie game, right? If you're not an indie game, it costs so much. And the cost of games hasn't gone up a lot. Like, we're at 70 now, maybe. But, I mean, we were at like 70, 80 back in the Super Nintendo days. You know, and compared in inflation right now, games are actually cheaper now than they were back in those old days. But they cost way more to make. They cost way more to make because it's super detailed 3D graphics and just like, you gotta have real music. It wasn't just like, hey, Nobuo Uematsu, write the entire soundtrack in chiptunes. You know, like, you're getting like freaking orchestras and shit like that, like doing all the stuff. And so when you create a video game, like I said, in comparison to the old days, you made a new game, and if it sold whatever, you made a new game. Today, you make a game, but you spent so much money on it, you have to stretch your budget out too. So here comes DLC Campaign 1, here comes DLC Campaign 2, here comes DLC Campaign 3, because you need to make that money back for how much extra money you put into it, right? So you gotta sell more content using all the money you spent on the engine you created for this game, because it took so much work to make the game function as it is that you have to keep using this engine to break even. You know, like, I remember hearing some stories, like, if you sold 1 million copies, if you're a PlayStation game, like, that was considered a failure or something like that. It's like, it's really, really crazy, right? So, you know, when he's talking about here, he's like, that affects the sales be after the initial launch. And that is very important. So for fighting games, they've built this entire new fighting game engine. They have to stretch it out for as many years as possible to make it worth having spent all that money on the game, right? You can definitely talk about like Soul Calibur and KOF 15. I mean, 15, I guess, is getting a little bit more stuff as they announced, but probably nothing too extensive. But, you know, for all intents and purposes, those games are probably considered failures. And that's probably why they stopped working on them, you know, and that's kind of the situation, because the games need to last longer for them to make money. But if the money that you're making, even off of the DLC seasons, isn't enough to justify another season, that's a problem. However, it is too naive and innocent a point of view to leave everything to game mechanics when talking about the survival of a game franchise. If they are so innocent, why did that game title that was so fun to play disappear? Where are those arcade titles that we were so crazy about? Where did that fighting game franchise with those great mechanics go? Why did that fighting game with those good mechanics disappear? There are so many titles that have disappeared, that didn't sell despite their highly regarded game mechanics, that are literally dying. People around 45 to 55 years old today should remember how many fighting games there were in the 90s. I was kind of talking about that a little earlier, and each of them had reasonably well-received mechanics. More to the point, there must have been some titles you rated as having much better mechanics than Tekken. Yeah, and again, you know, I talked about that. There were so many fighting games during that period of time. So yeah, Harada kind of hints at that too. Yeah, back in the 90s, there were a ton of, I mean, every company was making like 4 fighting games. You know, like I said, Capcom had, you know, Marvel vs. Capcom. They had a Street Fighter. They had Star Gladiators. They had Street Fighter EX. They had, you know, it was they just had, like, every company could actually make multiple fighting games. It was crazy. Okay. Yes, the fact that a series with no good game mechanics has disappeared may be on one hand, but it should not be the only reason. While it is true that games with better mechanics will be loved and survive longer, you are not so naive as to believe that, and you understand that the world is not simple. So yeah, kind of going along with that, what I talked about a little bit earlier during the Dark Ages talk. If you guys are looking for the Dark Ages talk, I'll definitely get that on YouTube as well after this. So don't worry, if you guys want to hear all me talking about Dark Ages, you'll be able to hear about all the things that I'm referring to over here. But you know, a great example of this is is literally Mortal Kombat. And like, I don't want to shit on Mortal Kombat, but again, Mortal Kombat 4 through 8, which was, I think, MK versus DC, I think that was 8. These games were awful. And really the only mechanic that made Mortal Kombat survive was the fatalities. And that has nothing to do with the actual gameplay, right? So, what Harada's saying here, that, mechanics are not a determining factor of whether or not a game is successful or not, right? I mean, I don't know how these games play, but isn't like the Worms franchise, like wasn't it at one point in time the Worms franchise was like one of the most popular game franchises out there? Were the Worms games actually any good? Like they always looked like they were just pumping out every goddamn thing that they could just to make as much money as possible, and quality wasn't a concern of theirs, I don't know. Like I said, I have never played any of the Worms franchise out there. Oh, they are great games? Oh, okay. They're actually legit great games. Okay, all right. Well, there you go. I don't know. Every time I saw them, I was always like, man, these games look terrible. Oh, they were fun and easy to get into. Boom. That is so important, dude. That was so important. Fun and easy to get into. This is what I've been talking about with fighting games, that we aren't doing a good job to make them fun and easy to get into. That we're just not doing that. World Tour for Street Fighter 6 was great for that reason. I don't think it transferred over particularly well, and I still think that there are much better ways to do it, to be honest with you. Creating one-player content, doing all these things was originally kind of where I was going with it, but nowadays, for me, a lot of it does come down to making the ranked experience more important because and more enjoyable, because ranked is where a lot of players go. So ranked needs to have a separate progress than just your rank. And ranked needs to be more social, and ranked, as you get better and better, should maybe open up more of the game mechanics, so you don't start with everything right away. We need to look at ranked a little bit more carefully, in my opinion. So, my title bar is blank. You are correct. I forgot to modify that. Let's see here. There we go. You get a little behind the scenes look at my controls over there. Okay, so I finished this paragraph over here. Okay. Especially in this day and age when there are so many choices of games, marketing is becoming more and more important, as it is the key to sales. And back to the point you said, if Soul Calibur 2 had a director as loyal, or better said long-term, as Harada Tekken. While this is a hypothetical, it is not an industry theory, as it is also a theory of consequence. Okay, I don't know what he means by that exactly. Again, obviously, this is not Harada's first language, so I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of some things in here that's kind of hard to parse, unless anybody in the chat kind of knows what he meant by that a little bit. Is not an industry theory, as also a theory of consequence. However, after observing the industry consequence, as in the game's success, I think, okay. However, after observing the industry for 30 years, I can say that in the case of fighting games, there have been many instances in which a series has stagnated or ceased to exist when a key player in the franchise leaves or disappears. And the reason for the disappearance of these key persons are often not only their own problems. So yeah, he's basically saying here that, yeah, there have definitely been a lot of situations where a franchise is kind of like the baby of a certain person, and then after that person leaves, it's like that franchise just doesn't have the ability to continue, right? It's interesting because, Metal Gear Solid 1 was kind of the transition point of Metal Gear, going from like, this is a really cool like spy game, into, like Kojima is definitely like on something here. And then by the time we got to Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 and 4, like At that point, the games just kind of went, woo, oh boy, what is happening here? But again, it was still under the vision of that creator. And when he left, like, it's almost impossible to create a new Metal Gear game at this point that would feel like a Metal Gear game, because Metal Gear now is so much the brainchild of Kojima that I don't think you can do it, right? And this is kind of why Smash without Sakurai, that'll be a scary thought. It's a very, very scary thought. The reason why Sakurai is so good at it is because he has so much of that background history of fighting games. And, you know, in the case of, like, Metal Gear here, like, I don't know if anybody could do anything that would appeal to the fans of Metal Gear. Like, you could make this awesome spy game, but if you don't have all this weird shit going on and, like the weird discussions that he has, you know, in the you know, intercoms and stuff like that. Like, I just don't know, would it really be a Metal Gear game? And it's the same reason why I don't want to see a new Darkstalkers game, because I don't know, unless they can find somebody correct to be put in charge who really understands and loves the original Darkstalkers games, right? Like, can you find someone who would do it right? Or would you find someone who'd be like, Morgan and Felicia are sexy, let's make this game like Dead or Alive? And it's just like, you know, it's just like TNA everywhere. Or, you know, like, hey, you know, there was a lot of violence in Darkstalkers, let's make this game like Mortal Kombat. And it's just like, you know, Bishamon is just slicing everybody, you give everyone fatalities and shit like that. And it's like, look, I like the Darkstalkers characters. I don't want to see them get, you know, quartered and stuff like that. Mortal Kombat characters, the reason why they work is because they're all kind of douchebags, and, like, they kind of intentionally make all of their characters a bunch of, like, smart asses and stuff. Like, there's very few characters in Mortal Kombat where you're like, oh, this guy, he's so sweet, you know, like, oh, I love this character. Like, so, you know, you don't feel as, like, wrong fatalitying people until they got to the point where you're literally fatalitying your own family, where you are basically murdering your kids or parents. And that was the worst, man. Like, that sucked. That sucked badly. But my point being is that, you know, when you lose certain people, like, it definitely changes the way that a game is created, and you can feel that a lot of times. Some games, you know, as long as, like, it's Mega Man and it's nothing too crazy, and in fact, Inafune wasn't even on the Mega Man team since the very beginning, so it's not like Mega Man is his brainchild. He's associated with it a lot afterwards, but, you know, after he left Capcom, we got Mega Man 9, which was really good. 10 was a attempt to milk Mega Man 9, again, reusing the engine. But Mega Man 11 was actually really good. In fact, it's one of my favorite ones. Yeah, and a lot of what Inafune did, a lot of people do have that attitude where he's kind of like a fraud because Mighty Number 9 kind of sucked, and now where is he? I mean, at least, God, Castlevania guy. Wow, shoot, why can't I? Igarashi made Bloodstained, and Bloodstained was a very good game. You could tell it was a Castlevania game made with a lot less budget, yet somehow he still made it really good, and it still felt like a Castlevania game. So Bloodstained is really, really good. So, but yeah, so he basically, he's basically admitting that, yes, one person can make the difference for a franchise here. At least that's what it sounds like he's saying. And in the case of let me see, after observing, yeah, okay. And in case of Soul Calibur, I can assure you, having seen it up close and personal, that this is the case. This was not simply a matter of sales and marketing, but I can tell you that the organizational changes and decision makers at Namco Bandai had a great deal to do with it. Interesting. So he's basically saying that one of the reasons why Soul Calibur kind of died was that the original creator, he talks about him later on, Yotoriyama, later on, leaving the Soul Calibur project sounds like was one of the main reasons why Soul Calibur kind of fell off a little bit, which is really interesting. So Necromancy Black says it's funny because there are plenty of examples of people who made great games and going solo and making trash. And the reason why that is, I mean, I always like use the Beatles as an example, even though the Beatles solo work is still very, very good. Like a lot of it, I mean, except for George Harrison for obvious reasons, but a lot of their work solo after the Beatles is not as good as their work during the Beatles. And a lot of it is because you have somebody pushing back. John and Paul were so opposite from each other that because they helped each other with the music, like it turned out really, really well. So like We Can Work It Out is a great example. You know, Paul McCartney's song, try to see it my way. There's a chance that we can do it together. We work so hard. It's like, major chords. It's happy. It's all positive. And then you get to the bridge, which John Lennon wrote, which all of a sudden goes, life is very short and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend. And it's all minor keys all of a sudden. And it's bleak all of a sudden. It's talking about how like, yeah, life kind of sucks, but that's why we should be happy. And so within one song, like it just makes that song so great, dude. Like, and then Day in the Life is another one that's so great because of the way they did that, right? So this time it was the opposite, that the verses were all written by John Lennon. You know, I read the news today, oh boy, 1,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire. It's like it's very minor key and it's slow and it's somber, and then you get through the first orchestral swell, and then immediately all of a sudden you switch to wake up, get out of bed, tried to comb across my head. On the way downstairs, I had a smoke. Looking up, I noticed I was late. You know, it's like all happy and stuff, and that's the bridge part that Paul McCartney wrote. And as soon as it ends with, you know, about an alarm, and all of a sudden you get to John Lennon, again, it creates a wonderful song. And so a lot of times, you know, when these guys like Inafune, you know, leave Capcom because they're like, oh, it was too hard to do this and this happened and, you know, whatever. And these people, you know, oh, I want to be free to make the game I want to make. You know, a lot of times it turned out good because you had that person's personality in your game. But at the same time, you had the other people to be like, whoa, buddy, reel it in a little bit. Like, this is a little too much. And having that, you know, working within the confines of adversity a lot of times is what makes you more creative, right? Charles M. Schultz, author of the Peanuts comic, has been very famous about saying something like this. He said one time, he's like, we make our best work when we're miserable. I don't know why the human brain is wired that way. And he was talking about that because he was referring to his own comics, because his comics got popular because, you know, Charlie Brown was like the first absolutely miserable antagonist of comic strips. Like before that, you know, the antagonists were always like the main guy, they're the hero, they were this. And like Charlie Brown was like the first one that you ever like were reading, and he just like hates everything. And that's because Charles M. Schultz was largely autobiographical because he was very much a pessimist. And when he actually gained a lot more happiness and more contentment with his life, the bite in his comic disappeared. It was really interesting. And so a lot of his late work, like if you actually read Peanuts, you know, mostly the late Peanuts stuff in comics, a lot of times you read it and you're like, I don't know why this is so popular. Like, it's just a dog joke, it's a this joke, it's whatever. It's like, it's not, like, what made this so popular? Well, when I was growing up, my dad had a giant volume of all of like the early Peanuts comics. And I read those like 20 times each, 100 times each. And back then, I mean, my God, like, dude, like, it is some bleak stuff, dude. Like, now that I'm older and I read some of that stuff, and it's actually why sometimes I go back and watch, like, Charlie Brown Christmas or Great Pumpkin, and I actually laugh louder now at some of the jokes that I didn't get when I was a kid, because some of that shit is dark, dude. Like, some of the comics that he's written back, you know, in the day, with Charlie Brown and stuff, like, they say some really, really dark things. And like, it makes you laugh because it's presented as a comic and in humor, but like you're just like, holy crap. And so again, it's just like adversity a lot of the times, weirdly enough, breeds the quality because you have people to keep you in check. And so, talking about, what Necromancy Black said, how people will leave and starts their own soul things and things actually get worse. That's why, is because when perfect example here, Thor Ragnarok, Thor Love and Thunder. I don't know what you guys thought of those. I did not like Thor Love and Thunder at all, but that's because it felt like Marvel was like, okay, Taika Waititi, do whatever you want. Ragnarok was great. And when you watch Ragnarok, you can tell Taika Waititi was still trying to keep it as a Marvel movie. When he got to Love and Thunder, he was like, I get to do whatever I want. And seriously, that movie it went off the rails, right? So again, sometimes, a friend of mine has also said, he loved South Park. He thought South Park was the funniest thing. And when he saw the South Park movie, he didn't enjoy it as much because now they were allowed to swear and say all the things they weren't allowed to say on TV. So to him, it just wasn't as funny as when you're dancing around it and kind of implying everything and stuff, A lot of times, limitations, adversity does create better content in a lot of way. So that's where my thought process goes on this, about the idea of, people leaving and then the stuff that they create by themselves is garbage. Sorry, this is a complete aside that kind of tangentially has to do with this. So let me keep going on over here. I will keep going on right here. So I just finished reading the Soul Calibur thing. The organizational changes and decision makers at Namco Bandai had a great deal to do with it. All right. I was one of the support personnel for the planning and debugging of SC's predecessor, Soul Edge, aka Soul Blade. Yeah, so before it became Soul Calibur 1 is technically Soul Calibur 2 because the original Soul Calibur was called Soul Edge in Japan, Soul Blade in America, and then Soul Calibur came out. It was technically the second game in the series, and so technically speaking, Soul Calibur 6 is actually Soul Calibur 7. If we want to be more accurate. And have since served as co-director for Soul Calibur 4. But I have basically been in the position of maintaining a certain distance from the Soul Calibur franchise. Okay, so he didn't have much to do with 5 and 6. In the past, the Soul Calibur series had a strong leader named Yotoriyama, who was also once the animation team leader of Tekken. And above all, the team of engineers was more knowledgeable about fighting games than Tekken, and had excellent programming skills. The Tekken project had been called a group of outlaws, bellicists, I don't know what that means, since the days of the old Namco, and was a unique group in the development department. But Project Soul was an elite group, a sophisticated development team. And that kind of probably explains why the home versions of Soul Calibur got so much love and the Tekken ones didn't get as much, right? I mean, they did add a few things here and there to Tekken, but Soul Calibur stood out in terms of the home releases a lot. So, oh, really? Some idiot who went after the name Edge with legal threats was why the name Soul Edge had to be retired for the series name? Really? Is that really what it was? Oh, is it bellicist or bellicist? I'm not sure. One who advocates war, opposed to pacifists. Wow, nicely job. It's like he's using Joey Tribbiani's thesaurus out there, I've never heard of that word, honestly. Yeah, Tekken 4, Jesus Christ, yeah. Let's see. So interesting. Okay, at the dawn of the Polygon era, and again, people who did not live through this transition of sprites to Polygon don't know how weird the game industry was at that time. Because it was everybody trying to learn how to do polygons very badly. and people who were just making games the old ways with sprites, this transition was a very, very rocky transition for video games in general. Because again, like, you came out with a lot of polygonal stuff, but a lot of the polygonal stuff was ugly as sin. And, you know, a lot of it was just not great. And you could tell a lot of people were learning how to do stuff. You know, it wasn't great, even though at the time, you would see Final Fantasy VIII and you'd be like, graphics will never get better than this. You know, like when you first saw the transition from you playing the game into a cutscene, you're like, dude, video games will never be as good as this. Like, you know, but like that whole transition period from sprites to polygons was a really, really awkward time for video games. If you've actually lived through it, you remember reading all the magazines and what the PlayStation was doing, and you know, the Sega Saturn, you know, they were coming out first. Then they found out PlayStation was going to be this 3D thing, so they delayed the Sega Saturn, added a 3D chip to it that wasn't a real 3D chip, which is why Virtua Fighter 2 and like, you know, Daytona and stuff like that didn't look as good on the Sega Saturn as the PlayStation 1, because the Sega Saturn was originally a 2D console that they basically added like a more powerful version of Nintendo's FX chip to make it do 3D so it could actually compete with the PlayStation. But the Sega Saturn's 3D never looked as good. It was always more pixelated, etc., because it was not designed that way. So this transition period threw a lot of things out of whack. Honestly, it was really crazy at that time. I thought Mario 64 was peak graphics, right? Dude, the analog control, dude, like, if anyone wants to talk shit about Nintendo, you can't talk about their controller innovations. I'm sorry, but Nintendo has always had all the best controller innovations out there. At the dawn of the Polygon era, Namco and Sega were leading the video game industry, and rivalries were intensifying. In a similar vein, the rivalry between the Tekken project and Project Soul was intensifying. I was in the same game designer department as Yotoriyama. Did he spell that wrong that time? Yeah, Yotoriyama of Project Soul, but we had friction to the point where we fought daily. That was just the first 10 years, and we were very close after that. By the way, he quit Bandai Namco. And Tekken and Soul Calibur were always rivals within the company as well, more so than people can imagine. That's really interesting, and it's funny too, because before Soul Calibur 6, I didn't realize how different Soul Calibur and Tekken were. I always thought that Soul Calibur was just the weapons-based version of Tekken, and that's kind of how I always approached it. But then when I started playing Soul Calibur 6, I was like, wow, this is a completely different game than Tekken. And I was like, now I get why you don't see crossover. Like it's weird, like Capcom games, like the Street Fighter players, like more Street Fighter players played like Marvel than Tekken players played Soul Calibur. Like, it was really weird that Tekken and Soul Calibur had very little crossover. Early on. And I didn't understand it until Soul Calibur 6, because I then realized that, yeah, they're very different games. And so hearing about this, how they had nothing to do with each other and they were actually kind of competitive with each other, makes a lot of sense, honestly. Let's see here. The two projects had different visions, different development policies, and very different ways of thinking about the brand. It is not that we hated each other. However, they were such rivals that it was not surprising to think so. However, even though they were different at the time, they had a clear vision for each other. Interesting. I'm wondering what that means. Like, I guess they thought of each other in certain ways with different reputations or something. Yotoriyama always said, there is no point in putting the needs of Tekken into Soul Calibur, and I agreed with him. Okay. So basically he's saying that these two games didn't want to incorporate elements, mechanics, etc. of one game from the other game because they just didn't think it was necessary, which is really cool. I gotta wonder, even though it was like this, how they actually got it so that Yoshimitsu could be in both games. Because if I'm not mistaken, Yoshimitsu was Tekken first? Yoshimitsu was Tekken first and then Soul Calibur? Or was it the other way around? Again, my old history of Bandai Namco fighters is not as strong. Dude, I wish Tekken... Oh, so Tekken first. That's what I thought. Okay. I wish Tekken had Soul Calibur movement because I hate the sidestepping system in Tekken. I love how it works in Soul Calibur. Like, Soul Calibur, the move was just so clean. And the way that the Tekken sidestepping... is, and again, this is just my own opinion, is it's too specific, right? It's not that, hey, you can sidestep move this way. It's, you can sidestep this move only this way and only with this specific timing. Like, it's so strict. Where it was like Soul Calibur was like, is he going to use a vertical move? I will sidestep. And it just felt more natural, you know? I could understand the vertical versus horizontal gameplay a lot easier. And, it also made it fascinating because I like the ring out aspect of Soul Calibur because the movement was so clean that, yes, a lot of the times if you got rung out, it was your fault. Like, when you first play the game, there's a lot of times where it's not your fault when you get rung out. But when you get to the higher levels, like, it becomes such a factor. Like, oh, this guy's near the edge. He's going to sidewalk. Go for throws because they can catch sidewalks, stuff like that. Or, when they're at the edge, I'll use more horizontals. But then does that mean the enemy knows that they can just crouch under everything you do? Like, it was just the way they made it work was really fascinating. And the movement contributed that to a lot. Obviously, if that movement was kind of like that in Tekken, it probably wouldn't work for Tekken very well. But, the fact that it's so hard to sidestep things in Tekken, because people are always like, James, you can sidestep that move by sidestepping left. First of all, thanks to my left-right dyslexia, which I talked about earlier in the Dark Ages period over there, I don't know which way sidestep left or sidestep right is. I just have no idea. And my stream chat learned to tell me to sidestep clockwise and counterclockwise, which helped a lot. But, like, the fact that you don't know which way so you can try to sidestep a move that is sidesteppable and fail, and then you might think to yourself, then that move isn't sidesteppable, right? Like, I feel like the game needs, like I said, my logic these days is that I don't think there's really any reason for the game not to tell you, like, right there. So, for example, Tekken, which throw you need to break should be listed on the screen after you don't break the throw. So, like, after the window in which the throw break didn't succeed, like, maybe under your health bar, it should just be, like, 1 break, or 2 break, or 1+2 break. And just tell you, like, what... We're at an age right now where clearly we have training mode and everything. We're not in the arcade anymore. It's not about getting people to put in more quarters for discoverability. They paid $60 for the game already. Obviously we can go look it up online or ask or, experiment in training mode. But why? But why, right? You're not giving anything away by telling people which way to break a throw by putting it on the screen after they failed to break the throw already. But you're making it so that people, because like when I was playing in the Sage Jam Slam, every time someone would throw me, I'm like, how do I break that? 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 Right? Like, I couldn't tell. You think I'm going to see left, right hand, one, like, I'm not going to see that. Like, I just have to know which way to break it, and I think, the era of making people put in more quarters to discover these things themselves is just not it's not a factor anymore. This is not what people want out of their fighting games anymore. They want to know how to play it right away. So, if you have moves, obviously the Tekken replay system is very, very good for that reason, because it's like, hey, you could have punished this. You want to see how? Take over the game. There's a lot of great things like that. But we need to do even more than that. I really think we need to do even more about that. You get way too much enjoyment imagining really heated discussions at Namco about guard mechanics. Oh, man. Soul Edge, Soul Blade, same games. Yeah, I like it being skill-based, though. Too many helping hands becomes SFA1. Right, but that's the thing is you don't make it easier by making the mechanics easier. You make it easier by telling people this is how you fight it. Like, this is just how you fight it, right? So, for example, high, low, mid in Tekken, like, if a move is high, if a move is mid, if a move is low, they should have different color hit sparks, right? High moves are blue, low moves are red, mid moves are yellow, for example. So with block sparks and hit sparks. So if you're blocking something and you see blue, then you're just like, oh, I see. All the blue ones are the ones that I can duck. So as you block a move multiple times, you know, even if nobody tells you that, you might actually make the connection yourself, and you'll be like, oh, I see. All the blue sparked moves I can duck. And so now if you see this crazy string where you block it and they're still plus or whatever and you can't punish them, you're like, why can't I do anything? The example I always give is Lucky Chloe's Power Crush. Lucky Chloe's Power Crush in Tekken 7 was safe on block. And I would fight it and I would block it and I would try to hit her and she would block it. I'm like, how is this fair? How is this fair? And my chat was like, you can crouch it. Like, you can just crouch under it and blow it up. So if you predict it, you can do that. And I was like, oh God, but why would I ever want to think to try that when none of the other Power Crushes are highs? You know, like, why does it have to be my chat that actually tells me this thing and not the game that actually tells it to me? If the game just had the blue sparks, and even if I first started playing and didn't pay attention to the color sparks, you know, as I play it, and then someone later on is like, so by the way, all the blue sparks are high, and then I'll be like, oh my God. And then at that point in time, I'll be able to learn it myself. I'll just see all the blue sparks. Oh, that was a blue spark. I can crouch under it. And that doesn't make the game easier to play. It makes it easier to learn. And that's fine. Making fighting games easier to learn is okay. We don't want to make it so that the game is baby to play. We don't need to make it so that everything holds your hand. But if we just make it so that you can learn the information yourself, like, that's the important part right there. How do you even think of doing that? Oh man. So that's kind of where I stand on that issue. So I don't even know how I got there. So let's keep going here. However, our policies clashed with each other in the debate over whether it was a good thing for a fighting game of the same company to have lever guards or button guards, for example. Discussion of is it good that they are products of the same company yet different there? So I guess they're saying, like, was it bad that Tekken used lever blocking and Soul Calibur used a guard button because they're from the same company? And if you're making a game from the same company, wouldn't you want to be kind of unified so that it is easier for people who play one game to go over to the other game, buy that game, and be able to play it? So that's what it sounds like they're talking about here. I will tell you another time how Tomonobu Itagaki, who was Tecmo at the time. So Itagaki is part of Team Ninja, was originally part of Team Ninja. He's the guy who created all the Dead or Alive games. He created, you know, the Xbox, the Xbox era, PlayStation 2 era, Ninja Gaiden games. Project. Did he work on Project M? I think he worked on Project M, right? But Itagaki was part of that whole crew over there. So he was the guy who made Dead or Alive, who was Tecmo at the time, adopted a hybrid lever button guard system for DOA, and how he called me into his office and proudly presented it to me. By the way, he and I attended the same university. Oh, okay, interesting. Whatever the case, Project Soul certainly had a leader and staff with soul and clear vision. The enthusiasm of the game designers on site could have surpassed that of the Tekken team, and it was enough to make us feel impatient. Competition breeds creativity and quality. If Project Soul had been able to maintain that structure, I sometimes wonder if things might be a little different today. Is that a Harada impression? It's a half Harada impression, but also just me doing a voice so that people listening to this on the podcast stuff have an easier time discerning when I'm reading and when I'm purposely talking. It's like a weird Harada and Iron Chef mix. It's a Harada Iron Chef mix. My pacing is very Iron Chef, so... when the paradigm shift from the arcade market to the console market occurred, SC's console version was outperforming Tekken in the North American market and had a high technical reputation. On the other hand, Tekken had grown to be an immovable object that earned overwhelming top income in the arcade game market, and in home use it was a title that sold less than Soul Calibur in North America and was characterized by wide sales in many countries in all regions. Soul Calibur was always seen as having a promising future even within Namco and was considered to be capable of expanding beyond the realm of fighting game in a rather global perspective. Even I, at the time, had a certain appreciation for the hypothetical possibilities. Interesting. So yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like I said, Soul Calibur 1 and 2 are some of the best-selling Soul Caliburs for a reason, because on console they were just so beloved and they did a lot of things. It's interesting to see how at one point in time Soul Calibur was actually seen as the higher potential cash cow for Tekken, for Namco, for Bandai Namco than Tekken was. And it's really, really interesting. Yeah, they were past Tekken 3 at this point. T1 and T2 were just fighters that had a cool look and sound to them. Yeah, they were just, hey, look, we're the other game that's not Virtua Fighter. And believe me, when Tekken 1 and Tekken 2 were the only games that were out, I thought the game looked horrible. I hated Tekken. I thought it was stupid looking. I hated the way the characters, like when they did the hell sweeps and their bodies like contorted. And I was just like, what is this? Virtua Fighter is so much better. So for the longest of time, I was always more a Virtua Fighter person than a Tekken person, because I always thought Tekken just was so ugly. So when people started saying like Tekken was better looking than VF, I was like, are you guys blind? But you know, eventually it just got to the point that where what Tekken was doing was just had better presentation, more like sparks, you know, more particle effects and these kind of things, whereas Virtua Fighter was very plain Jane. But I just thought the animations were better. I liked the colors better, because every time I looked at Tekken, the screen was always orange and black and red and gray. And so I always thought Tekken was really ugly. And so Soul Calibur like was so beautiful. And I remember working at the UCLA arcade, so we had the Soul Calibur 2 machine there, or Soul Calibur 1, I don't remember which one, but it was the one that the attract mode would just have them do the katas with all their weapons. So like you would just see, you know, it wasn't Killick, or maybe it was Killick at the time. You know, he would do the things in the bam, bam with the sticks, and you would see Lee Long come along and he'd just do all like the crazy nunchuck stuff. And like you would watch those, and you know, you'd watch like Sofitia or one of the other characters, you know, do a Xianghua, do like all the really nice, you know, sword ballet kind of things. And I was just thought it was so beautiful. Like I just wanted to have those in video form because I thought they looked so good. Holy crap. However, as you all know, as the industry expanded, it became larger and larger, and companies merged with each other. Bandai Namco is no exception and has changed for better or for worse. Yeah, so, but I know these companies separately. So when I was growing up, like especially on the Nintendo, you know, my brother had his spreadsheets of all the Nintendo games and the companies that made them. So we knew all the companies. And Bandai and Namco were two separate companies, right? Namco was in America what was called Midway. They were the ones who originally created like Pac-Man and Mappy and, you know, these kind of games. And Bandai was a completely different company that made games like, they made like Kid Nicky, right? Like Bandai actually made Kid Nicky and like some of these other games that were in the arcade. They eventually merged to become Bandai Namco. Your local got VF1 on launch before the entire local arcade scene died off. I got a Saturn specifically for that one game. After the local scene died, I kept hearing from other people how hype Tekken was for people and was really excited to try it on PlayStation. And then got my hands on it immediately. What the fuck is this shit? Yeah. I mean, to be fair, VF1 was kind of grotesque looking, but that's why it's so iconic and why they keep referencing all the time. But VF2 was beautiful, dude. VF2 was wonderful. Like the change from VF1 to VF2 was like glow up city, dude. Like seriously. As you know, Japanese game companies and the IT industry do not have the same organizational systems as those found on the west coast of North America. There are not many presidents or directors with engineering or game designer backgrounds, and most of them have a sales background or are management professionals or come from banks. In other words, people with excellent organizational management skills have become decision makers. This is not a snide remark, but Jasmine keeps walking past my monitor, but a fact. One thing is for sure, they are not familiar with game development, game branding, or the game community. You like those old polygonal games like VF1? Again, it's just one of those things, right? It's when you grow up with a lot of those things, that kind of look has a lot of nostalgia. So for me, whenever I see pixel graphics, I get excited. Pixel graphics, like, they bring out a lot in my heart that I'm just like, oh, God, I'm playing Celeste, and I'm like, oh, this is so beautiful. Oh, my God, this is so good. And for me, like, PlayStation 1 era polygon stuff is just like, I can't look at it. Like, I just think it looks absolutely grotesque, because, for me, I loved sprites. I thought the sprite games were so beautiful, and they were finding new crazy technology with it. And then all of a sudden they changed to these ugly polygons, and I was like, this is not better. And I was very anti 3D back in those days. So, I hated Tekken. I loved all the Capcom fighting games. That's why I never really played a lot of Tekken in the past. I loved all the Capcom games, and, I loved all the old, 2D platformers and stuff. That's why I loved Symphonies of the Night, these kind of things like that. And I was always like, polygons aren't better, but I'm still very anti 3D in a lot of ways. Like, I hate 3D platforming. I think 3D platforming is still one of the worst things in the world. And I still think 3D action games are one of the worst things in the world. Like, people know when they watched me play a lot of Outer Wilds, because I would cry about 3D graphics a lot there. But for me, trying to replicate 3D in a 2D on a 2D plane is just, it's unwieldy. Like the beautiful thing about like old 2D platformers, like, you could see a gap and you knew if you could jump it or not, because you just got used to the point where you just knew the distance. In 3D games, like, because the level might be a little higher or lower than what you actually think it is, you don't know if you can jump there. I spent playing most of Uncharted 1 and Uncharted 2 sending Nathan Drake to his death like 1,000 times because I was like, can I make this jump? All right, I guess I can't. I think I can. Try it again. And died. And like, I hate that shit, right? Like, and the fact that, 3D games cannot replicate the precision of 2D games. Like, you watch these people play these crazy 2D games where they're just dodging bullets like shmups and all these things. It's just like, it's like crazy. And then you get to every 3D game and it's like, you're getting shot from off screen over here. And then you run behind something and you crouch and you gain your life back. And it's just like, they have to put these in here because in general, it's not fair. And because games have to be so stuck on realism, you can't fight 7 soldiers running up to you and going, badoo, 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 and have these slow bullets slowly come at you and you weave your way through bullets because games have to be realistic. So if someone shoots a gun, it's gotta be instant. Whereas when you play Contra and you fight these bad guys and they're going pick, 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 and they just shoot these bullets that come slowly and now you can dodge through them. Like, realism is killing video games, man. I'm telling you. I'm telling you, though. Man, and like another example that I gave, because somebody was arguing me, is like, I don't know what you're complaining about. I can usually tell how far away I am from something. And I was saying, all right, I played Breath of the Wild. I had some of those bow and arrow target situations. Sometimes the balloons that you had to shoot were bigger than other balloons or smaller than other balloons. But the thing about it is, if you make all three balloons look exactly the same, and you take one balloon and make it bigger than the other balloon, but move it backwards, they are going to look the same size. You cannot replicate the 3D-ness of it on a 2D TV. You just can't. And so if you have something that's bigger, scrolled back, at like this, like on your TV screen, they look like the same size, they look like the same distance. You have no idea. And so you can't make these kind of split decision sequences. Miyamoto knows this. That's why Super Mario Sunshine added the stupid water thing. And I know a lot of people hated it. I loved it because I didn't fall everywhere. And he did that because he knew that 3D platforming was kind of impossible to really judge accurately. So he created this crutch for people to be able to platform better in that game. You know, so see, having FPS bullets travel across the screen like a 2D game, I think it's so important. I mean, look at the way all 3D games work, right? Every 3D game these days has roll dodge. Roll dodge, which is basically, I turn myself invisible for a brief amount of time because there's no accuracy. That's essentially what that mechanic is. That is absolutely what that mechanic is. And it's not all Dark Souls' fault. All the games had it. Devil May Cry had it. God of War had it. Like, every one of these action games has the invincible roll. I think even Rygar had it. The new Rygar had it, right? So, like, everything is roll dodge. And then what do bosses do? Oh, they do the giant circular wave. They do this giant circular wave because they need to create a bullet system that you can't just run around. So every one of them, like Bowser, jump, bam, wave comes out of him. Other evil boss, wave comes out of them. And you roll through it by being invincible. It's like, dude, like, then you go watch someone play like expert level of like freaking Contra 3 on the Super Nintendo, and they're just dodging bullets and they're like amazing and doing all this stuff, but the bullets are slow, but it's still enough that you can actually find your way around things. And you're just like, this is what I want to play, man. This is what I want to play. I don't want to play I was playing Tunic, and I got to the first boss, and the first boss started attacking. I was like, this is a cool puzzle platforming game. And then all of a sudden, the first boss I had to fight became a slash, roll, slash, roll. And I got so sad. I got so depressed as soon as that happened, because I was like, this Tunic game is awesome. And then I found out that their boss fights and major action sequences were attack, dodge, attack, dodge, attack, dodge. And I was like, oh, God, kill me now. You know, and you know what the problem is that no one's trying to innovate. No one is trying to do anything different, and that is the biggest sin, in my opinion. Ugh. Anyways, that's a total aside. I don't even know how I got over there. Let's move on. For example, on the west coast of the U.S., each position has its own board of directors, but this is not the practice in Japan. As a result, what happens in the case of major game companies is that the management and operation of game companies is focused on organizational management and human capital available resources. Within this framework, game developers will do their best. So in Japan, what happens in the case of major game companies is that the management and operation of game companies is focused on organizational management and human capital available resources. Interesting. Is he talking about the West in there, or is he talking about the East? Oh, is he talking about Japan? When he says what happens in the case of major game companies. For example, on the West Coast, each position has its own board of directors. As a result, what happens is the case of major game companies that the management or game developers will do their best. Based on what Inafune said in a very famous interview, this sounds like he's referring to the Eastern offices, because what Inafune said was in the East, like, a lot of people just did their job, because whether you did it great or poorly very rarely affected you getting promoted or demoted or fired or whatever, that there wasn't a lot of merit-based advancement in Japanese companies. And so a lot of people would just kind of half-ass the job a little bit. And so by what Harada is saying here seems to kind of echo that a little bit within the Japanese framework. Within the Western framework, game developers will do their best because there is more merit-based and stuff like that. But what will be the career roadmap for game developers? The career path of a game developer who focuses on organizational management and human capital available resources results in becoming a manager of an organization. This is a phrase that many of the leaders of each part of the Ace Combat project, both we at the Tekken project and Project Soul, have actually been asked. How long are you going to be in the field? When are you going to become a manager? And when will you be the manager of the organization? How long will you be a creator? That was directed at the director of Ace Combat. Lord British went that way and ended up falling out of the top of EA. I was just tweeting to Diaphone just now. It's one of the hardest things because, like, if you're really good at your job, people tend to promote you as a manager, and that's like the biggest mistake. Because if you're really good as a programmer, like, they want to reward the people who do the good job by putting them into managerial positions because that's how they justify paying you more money, etc., etc. But that's the mistake, because you're taking the good programmer away from a position that they were really good at and putting them in a position they might not be very good at, and in fact might even be more harmful. One of my last managers at Symantec, super smart guy, great programmer, he was so good. But then every time he asked us, he became a manager, and every time he asked, he's like, how long do you think it'll take for you guys to finish this? And I was like, it'll take us 3 sprints to finish this. And he was like, what? Why would it take 3 sprints? Like, this is not that hard. You guys should be able to do this in 2 sprints. And we're like, no, this is our true estimates. He's like, no way, this has got to be 2 sprints. And so we did everything and made it fit into 2 sprints. And then after 2 sprints was over, we weren't finished. And he was like, how can you guys not be done? And I looked at him and I was like, you made us change it from 3 sprints to 2 sprints. We said 3 sprints. We are only in 2 sprints because of you. Probably one of the reasons why I got let go from the company at one point in time, but because I was one of the only people willing to speak up, because I was just so tired of dealing with shit like that all the time. But like, I was just like, there's no way we can finish this. But that was the problem, is that maybe if he was the main programmer, we could have done it in 2 sprints because he's really good. But like, we took our best guy, one of our best guys, away from programming and turned him into a manager. And so he was bad at managing, and we weren't as good at programming. It's like, why do we do this, dude? It's so stupid. Like we were like according to, like, I responded to Diaphone Suites, like, people who do good at jobs technically are punished for it, right? Because now the expectation for you doing well is there. So if you do okay, people are like, whoa, no, you're not performing. And all the people who perform badly, like, you kind of coddle them and try to make them do better. And so instead they put more work on the people who are good. So they're technically getting punished for being good at their job, you know? It's really annoying. It's really annoying. It used to happen to me all the time because I used to be a really good QA guy, and so they just kept dumping more work on me when other people couldn't do it, you know? If you stay late, yeah, then they expect you to stay late, you know? Then when you leave early, they're like, why are you leaving early, James? You know, like, it's like, come on, dude, like, let me go. Hi, Nathan. Um, no one in the organization at the time was asking, when are you going to grow up to be a great game developer? Literally, not one person talked about the career path of a game developer. It was all about management and administration, and it was true that this was not an organization that could properly evaluate the content of games and their value. If my mic dies because of Nathan, please let me know. He is shoving his head on the microphone right now. Hi, Nathan. And by becoming a manager of an organization, he meant that one should not stick to one thing forever, but should broaden one's perspective to every department, division, and business. In fact, at the time, the only way to advance one's career was under such a system. So basically what he's saying is that if you are in a Japanese company, moving up was only basically becoming managers. And, you know, that's kind of what I described at my company here, but there are a lot of game companies, and there were a lot of people at the company that just outright refused to become managers. So they did become senior developers and then senior architects, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, there at least was a path for those people who like just outright refused to be a manager. Like my company tried to turn me into a manager one time, and I was terrible because I spent the entire time talking to the people under me like, hey, have you got this done? It's okay if you haven't, but, you know, it would be really cool if, you know, we could get this done soon, but no pressure or anything. Or, you know, like I was so bad at like getting people to actually do their job because I never wanted to be mean to anybody that like I never got anything done. And so they quickly figured out I was not a good manager, and they stopped pushing me in that direction, you know. I didn't even try to be the cool manager. I just didn't want to be a jerk, you know. I just wanted to be friendly, that's all. Oh, man, it's so sad. Broadening one's horizon sounded good, but in game development, it was the opposite of pursuing a single path or mastering something. Also, at the time, the concept of job rotation was widespread, based on the idea of broadening one's horizon, growing as a manager, leading any department or any division or business, and contributing to the expansion of the company. It was originally intended for younger employees. What are you doing, Nathan? But as a result, it was undoubtedly one of the factors that gave rise to the trend that working only on a specific game or a specific genre of work forever is not a career development and is not valued. So what he's talking about here is that at the time there was no benefit to staying on a project like Toriyama could have with Soul Calibur, because that was more an indication that you were not advancing, not growing, and not doing anything, and it was looked a little bit more down upon. So, you know, that role of staying as the producer for something, it seems like that was not the goal, and that you wanted to move on to other stuff. And so that's why the pressure, that's why, like, it sounds to me like, you know, a game like Soul Calibur did lose its visionary, because, you know, the drive to stay in that position isn't as important, which is fascinating here. Oh, what's up, Pat the Flip? What's up? Talking about Harada's thing, where he's talking about all the Japanese developers over there, and basically what they've done, and how comparing Soul Calibur to Tekken creation and such. Which I'm sure you read and was absolutely fascinated with, considering, you know, all your work on 2XKO. So I would imagine so. Working on a specific game for his career is not valued. Then the phenomenon of people leaving various titles and series as if they were being peeled off began to occur. So then the phenomenon of people leaving various titles and series as if they were being peeled off began to occur. So again, it wasn't beneficial to stay at the company and keep doing the same role if you were in the same role, it wasn't like you would get promoted into a better version of that role. It was interpreted as being stagnant, so a lot of people ended up leaving those roles. Each time a project's key players were peeled away, the big dreams and visions that the project once held became weaker. Project Soul was struggling to survive, or it seemed to me, so it seemed to me, especially among its younger members. However, it seems that it was difficult for them to maintain their vision, will, and organizational structure now that they are no longer in the game development centered world of the past, but rather a game development team that is just one of all of the businesses in the group companies. So, however, it seems it was difficult for them to maintain their vision, will, and organizational structure now that they are no longer in the game development centered world of the past. Okay. So what he's saying is that this is the way it is in Japan now, but in the past, it sounds like Japan was more, these game companies were more about, game development, being game development centered, that it was more important about making the games. And now it's just, we're a small part of a business, and so the goal now is to grow and become manager and get higher up in the company, et cetera, et cetera. So he was saying that, it was, that's why it's harder for them to maintain their vision, the will to keep working on these games, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really interesting. Hey, thanks for the sub, Mazi M. At the same time, of course, this was happening to me in the same situation. Yeah, getting more corporate, you would say, for sure, yeah. It happens to a lot at big companies, and I've talked about it at my old job. It's one of the reasons why I started hating working there, because it just got more and more corporate. Because again, Symantec used to be Google before Google was Google, and now Google's not even Google anymore. Like before, it was like, we want to work at Google because it's so great. They're great to their workers, and their motto is do no evil, and that all went away. But when that was going on, everybody was like, Google is where to work. Like, this is great. And before that, Symantec was that place to work. Symantec was wonderful a long time ago when I first joined it. So he's talking to me. This was happening to him in the same situation. First, the company was split into a development company and a publishing company. And I became of the publishing company member, but also the head of a new department called Global Business Development, which had nothing to do with game development. None of my subordinates were in development. They were all marketing staff. This meant that from a company organizational point of view, I was out of the Tekken project, both in terms of the company itself, its divisions and departments, and its budget management. This was not my idea, of course, but was decided by the management at the time according to the company policy I mentioned earlier. And while this might have put me on a career path, I had something else in mind entirely. Interesting. So he was actually taken out of that whole area. So he was actually taken away from making games and actually just went into the whole marketing department. Interestingly enough. I'm doing a fake Harada voice that's also partially Iron Chef a little bit. But basically, when the people actually listen to this, they'll be able to more easily discern when I'm talking or when I'm reading. Kojima, I think he just quit Konami. I think he was just like, I don't want to make games like this anymore. And he quit. And so he came to the West to try to make games out here because the way that, like one of my friends who, was in the gaming industry, at one point in time, he was like, what's the newest genre that Japan has created? He's like, they're not doing anything. Like all the cool genres like FPSs, RTSs, MOBAs, he's like, all the new stuff is coming out of US. He's like, Japan is kind of stagnating. They're like not daring enough. They're not trying to do enough at this point. And so like, I think a lot of people like Kojima and Inafune left to the West because they wanted to be able to make different things a little bit. And like we said, it's worked out for some and not for others. So, let's see here. I made the decision to lead the Tekken project despite the fact that I was in a different company, department, and division, and had no budget authority. I practically manipulated the creative and budget planning. Whoa, he was like working on Tekken in secret practically. Why? I knew that the soil and currents of such a large organization just happened from things that are happening due to delusions caused by the group mind, and a head appointed solely for career advancement with no love for that game title and no long-term vision cannot be good for the survival of the series or the fan community. Wow. So he's just actually like he's put so much into Tekken that he didn't want to see somebody else fuck it up, basically. That's right. Yeah, MGS5 wasn't finished and they pushed him out. And that's why MGS5, like, you can't even tell if you've actually, like, beaten the game or not. It's, like, super confusing. Yeah, a lot of people were talking about Mighty Number 9 a little bit earlier. So, and we, Tekken Project, always said that the rights to the title belong to the company, but the fan community can only rely on that team that has the will to make the game. Wow, the rights of the title belong to the company, but the fan community can only rely on the team that has the will to make the game. That's a bold statement right there, you know, to be able to say, like, look, the fans, like, basically can only rely on the people who have the will and the heart to make the game the right way. So, I mean, and that, you know, that's what you kind of have to cater to. That's kind of crazy. So from the very beginning, I decided to completely break the rule of tacit understanding in a company. So I decided to continue to play the role of Tekken project leader, which was not directly related to my original duties, and proceeded with the development as an independent team with independent decision making, as a team beyond the boundaries of the company or organization. With the team members who became a separate company, this move was very much disliked by the publisher department heads. Must have been very uncomfortable with it. Yeah, he hated me so much. So yeah, he basically went rogue. So basically, Harada's literally saying he went rogue at Bandai Namco and was like, you know, I'm not gonna be part of this marketing team. I'm also going to be doing all the Tekken stuff. That's actually created. Harada is Jack Bauer. We need somebody who cares about this game, damn it! Chloe, get me into the code base, damn it! But it was to stay true to the fan base. Yeah, absolutely. And again, like, that's cool, right? That's what's important. And, you know, so much of a fighting game's success and failures come from, you know, these people in charge because of their motivations and what it is that they're trying to do. I mean, again, I don't know if there was any organizational changes at Capcom, but, you know, towards the late part of Street Fighter V, like, the game just started getting so much better. And it seemed like the people making Street Fighter 6 actually, like, cared about fighting games and stuff like that. So, you know, maybe there was some sort of organizational change. Maybe something happened with the Street Fighter team, but clearly towards the later end of Street Fighter V, it got significantly better. But in any case, I'm going to continue here. Yes, as we mentioned above, we, Tekken Project, were called a group of outlaws, bellicists. So we survived as the only group with independent decision-making in the great tide of group companies, now recognized as an official organization. Wow, so we survived as the only group with independent decision-making in the great tide of group companies. This is actually also, I mean, dude, I can see why people were saying that Bandai Namco is probably reading this like, what the fuck are you doing, Harada? Because, I mean, literally, he's basically saying, yeah, we basically ignored everybody at the top, did our own thing, and that's why we're successful, you know? Like, I mean, that's almost what he's saying over here. And, you know, a lot of times it makes a lot of sense. Like I said, you know, it's good to have the adversity, but not the adversity in like the market tests destroy the thing, you know, like the we need a happy ending in Blade Runner, and you know it's a noir film, so put in a useless voiceover, you know, these kind of things. Like, you need somebody who actually has an interest in creating the project have a alternate view of you, right? Like, so when I brought up the John and Paul Beatles thing, they both wanted to make music. They both wanted the Beatles to be successful. So even though they fought a lot and they looked at things very differently, they had the same goal, right? But a lot of times what Harada's talking about here, and what I'm talking about, you know, in terms of not having someone meddling, is that these people have the intention of like only making money. I don't care about this. We just need to, this is the numbers. This is important for the fiscal year of 20 whatever, blah. Like, they're not as interested. Like, if you have someone else being like, no, Harada, I think we should add a heat system because it'll add this. And Harada's like, but I don't like adding new systems. I've never added a new system. But the other guy's like, you should try. And, you know, whether or not you like the heat system, the point is that, you know, two people are working together to create a similar project. And that kind of does produce a lot of very, very interesting results, honestly. If there is only one major difference between Project Soul and the other companies, this is the only one. There are many titles that have disappeared in the course of these past transitions. There are no obvious villains in that history. They are all being chipped away in the course of a larger trend. So basically, Soul Calibur died and basically didn't have much backing because it was just part of the standard Japanese company situation where people left because staying in and, you know, working on your vision wasn't something that normally happened. And it only happened for Tekken because Harada himself just had that, you know, he was like, no, I want to stay true to the game. I want to keep making this game. It was literally, he forced his way to keep doing that. Otherwise, it might have happened with Tekken, you know, as well. I'm sure, you know, we can say a lot of the same things about like Miyamoto and such. You know, Miyamoto, whenever a new Mario game comes out, although he's like super high up there and is like vice president or whatever, still like that, he still has a lot of effect on how these games are made. Obviously, probably because he just has like, I don't want to let anybody else ruin my game, right? Like, to him, Mario means something, and he probably wants to maintain. That's my air conditioner, sorry. He probably wants to maintain that as much as possible. And so that's why he's still so involved with a lot of those games, you know. Yeah, a lot of people don't like the heat system for lots of reasons, Forrest. So, you know, again, for me, since I haven't played as much Tekken as a lot of other people, it's neither here nor there for me, so... however, I think me and the Tekken project were evil in the eyes of the group companies. In Tekken, Heihachi, and Kazuya, fight is about who's left standing, nothing else. And this line used to be my motto. Interesting. Wow, Harada's more of a rebel than I thought he was. I kept this in mind throughout our rivalry with Soul Calibur, and even when the market for 3D fighting games was becoming increasingly competitive, I continued to tell my team, no matter how you do it, the last one standing wins. And this motto remained unchanged even in the midst of the major trends that occurred within the group companies. I understand that there were some board members who were not happy about it, and I received quite a few complaints. Wow. That's so crazy. I didn't realize Harada was such a rebel and that, like, yeah, he was probably pissing off a lot of people, dude. He was probably pissing off a lot of people doing it in a completely different way. That's crazy. So we were never obedient, but always a wicked group with a strong will. I've realized through these experiences that, unfortunately, I probably have a bad personality. Well, I don't know if I would call it a bad personality, but clearly a lot of people out there in that organization probably think of him as, unsubordinate and stuff like that, as like an insubordinate, or a troublemaker. I think this was the only difference between Tekken Project and Project Soul. I think that the fact that the number of members who had the drive to keep the title alive, even if they had to jump through all kinds of pressure, decreased as the organization changed. And that is one of the aspects that weakened Project Soul little by little. I am not saying that is all, but it was a big factor. Happened due to organizational policy, not individual problems. That's really crazy. Golgoth says, this is definitely an interesting testimony regarding the state of developer profession in Japan. However, what Harada says is absolutely not specific to the developer profession. Everything that is exposed in his testimony could have been said by any other professional in any other sector of activity. The only condition is that a medium or a large structure. Right, yeah, Japan is a lot like this. Yeah, definitely not, just that. And in fact, if you guys haven't actually watched the Agretzko series on Netflix, is actually really fascinating because they talk about this a lot in that show. Like, that show actually weirdly connected with me a lot, even though it's about some 20-something single red fox, it's oh, this is Sanrio, but the Agretzko is working at a dead-end job at a company with a boss who doesn't care, and they're all just stuck in this machine forever, and none of them are advancing and everything. Dude, I watched it and I was like, why am I watching this? This is I've lived through this, and the only way that she could, actually relieve stress is go to karaoke and sing death metal. And I was like, same, Agretzko, same. Same, Agretzko. It was such a good series, dude. Holy crap. And then Golgot says, in short, it is not a problem related to the sector of activity or the profession, but a much more fundamental problem related to the very objective of capitalism as it gets closer and closer to liberalism. Yeah, I mean, in America, it's different because America, we do have merit-based, growth. But again, as I was saying, I don't think that that's necessarily the right thing to do because, growth usually, similarly to this, what the stories Harada's telling is that growth usually does mean you become a manager, and I keep thinking that that's a mistake. Only people interested in becoming managers should become managers, because people who are good at coding or whatever should not become managers, honestly. But yeah, I mean, again, I've been getting super political on the stream a couple of times very recently, so capitalism, I'll avoid talking about capitalism right now. Anyways, and so he ends this by saying, but from my point of view, I don't think the fire of Project Soul has been extinguished. There are still a few people in the company who have the will to do it. I would like to believe that they are just not united now. Nice. Okay. So yeah, he's basically saying that, people probably want to make Soul Calibur, but the people who have that will, who have that ability to make Soul Calibur are not, in the group together because they've been peeled off and splintered and such. He doesn't mention Okubo here, who worked on 6. Who I think did a fantastic job with 6. Of course, Okubo now works for ArcSys, and he is the president of the U.S. division of ArcSys now, if I'm not mistaken. So Okubo has moved over to working for ArcSys. And so it might just take another person who actually has that kind of drive to make a new Soul Calibur game to make it. And so, the reason why, he wrote this whole thing in response to what Jason Montoya said here, which is really interesting here, is that, Jason is basically saying that the reason why Soul Calibur didn't survive is because they didn't have a person like Harada in charge the whole entire way, and talked about game mechanics and stuff. And Harada's response is basically just saying that the way that companies are structured, and that, staying as as the game designer, as that lead game developer, is not seen as advancement in your position, that people get peeled off. So it really doesn't matter as much what the person, it doesn't matter, if what the mechanics are, all these things like that. It really has to do with, being able to maintain a team to keep working on that. And like I said, the only reason why probably some games like Mario continue to succeed is that Miyamoto still has his fingers in there. And not only that, but Miyamoto has probably properly trained a lot of people to follow a lot of his mindset, has probably passed on a lot of what it is that he loves about video games. One of the things that Miyamoto has often said about, making video games is that his favorite thing is the concept of discovery. So he was like, when you were a kid, you would go into like a small cave that you would see in a mountainside or whatever, and you would explore and try to find something, or you would open something and find something cool inside it. And so his idea was, to make games that can reproduce that, you can always discover things and you can find things on your own. And he wants to replicate that childlike wonder of discovery, which is why, old games like Zelda, where you would just bomb things or push rocks, or, Mario games, you would find crazy techniques or shortcuts and stuff like that. He was very interested in that. Soul Calibur was a very horny game. I know 5 and 6, I know it got a little hornier the later it got, but I wonder if that was just one of those things that they did it to, try to increase the sales, honestly. That could just be a factor. You have no idea, right? Nitsuma with TVC and MVC3 says Flashy Flash. Pretty sure Capcom didn't like how the game sales were, so he wasn't involved in MVCI. Yeah, I mean, there's really a lot of interesting things too, because one of the things that was interesting about MVC3 is, I heard stories that they were scared to make it as broken as it turned out to be, and that we had Seth Killian there who knew people loved broken MVC2, so he was just like, no, this is what people want. Oh man. So yeah, in reference to one of the things being said in the chat over here. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it was weird because Street Fighter V got so good towards the end of Street Fighter V. Like before that, there was just all these weird problems. It didn't feel like the game was getting any better, in a significant way. But I don't know, something must have changed at Capcom towards the end of Street Fighter V, and lasted on through Street Fighter VI, and all of a sudden those games turned out really, really strong. So I don't know, like maybe something happened. I don't know. Justin did things to White at Evo that made the neighbors want to move. What? What are you talking about? Is this just recent when he was no, he wasn't in Japan, he was in Korea. But yeah, no, MVC2, it's really interesting because when you watch the way they tried to play MVC2, they played it from a very different mindset. Like, to them, they couldn't grasp at the time. Again, it's very different now, but at the time it was very weird for them to just spam your meter to lock people down to go for chip damage. Marvel 2 had a very, very weird mindset that was so different, right? So if you go play Marvel, you're like, well, he's doing this, how do I counter that? And the real answer is you don't counter it, you just don't be there. Marvel was about moving and getting away from things. Like whenever I tried to play Marvel 3, like I was playing against him and he was using Amaterasu, and you know he would come and air dash with Amaterasu at me, and I would just kept trying to launch him out of the air and attack him and do all this stuff. And finally he stopped and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I know you're going to air dash at me, so I'm trying to counter it." He's like, "But you know I can air block out of this air dash and like call an assist, right? So why are you hitting me?" And I was like, "Because I know you're gonna do something, so I want to counter it." And he was like, "No. He was like, "You get the hell out of there." He was like, "You see me air dash, super jump, or run under me." He was like, "Just get away. Like, you don't want to let me get to the point where I can lock you down." Same thing when I fought Flo, R.I.P. to Flo, bless you, Flo. In Marvel 3 as well, he would hit me with the Wesker assist that shot low, and then do the jump air dash box air dash with Dante. So he would hit me with the slash as a high and the gunshot as a low, and I kept dying. And I was like, "How do I get away? How do I survive this?" And he was like, "Don't be there." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "Just don't be there. Don't let me put you in that mix-up." And I was like, what? And he's like, "Watch me play Justin." And so we got Justin, and Justin started to play. And sure enough, Justin never got caught in that unblockable because he was never there. He was just never there. And I was like, what the hell? I was like, no wonder I can't play Marvel. I didn't get Marvel at all. You know, it's a very different mindset. And none of it was intentional. Again, Marvel 2 was one of the biggest cash grabs in the history of Capcom. Like, they made like 7 new characters. Everyone else was reused sprites. There was like 5 backgrounds in the game, and like the game was like so hastily put together. You know, when the game first came out, all everybody did was talk shit about the game. You know, it was like, what is this music? What are these graphics? Like, what is, oh my God, you know, like people thought the game was terrible. But the way that it turned out and the way the game ended up being played was so different than the way like fighting games had been played up to that point. And so, you know, somehow, well, the reason why it caught on in America is because we loved the Marvel characters. You had Wolverine in the game and stuff. And because there was a group of people who just dedicatedly kept playing it. And honestly, I mean, you know, although it like in retrospect, it sucks, but all the rivalries and all the drama and all that stuff like that did a lot to really keep that scene alive and growing and exploding and stuff. So people loved it, and that's why MVC2 succeeded in America, but in Japan, like they didn't understand it, and in fact, Japan was more obsessed with combos, right? So, like me, like I was obsessed with combos, right? So all I was trying to find combos, but when you watch like the top MVC2 players, they weren't about like these long combos. They kept dropping their combos and going for resets and doing all these things. Meanwhile, all the Japanese players were like just trying to find these crazy combos that like kill you and all this stuff. And, you know, that's not how the game was played. You know, the game was played to be as dirty as possible. It wasn't an elegant combo game. And so a lot of the good the Japanese players who really enjoyed playing MVC2 were combo people. You know, I talked about Liquid Metal, a famous player who used to make combo videos, part of the Meiko Sisui team eventually, Sisui team with a couple of other guys, I think. But they made these great combos, but, you know, they never were in the proper mindset to play the game versus at this point in time. So that's just how it is. Like, they just never had the mindset to play the game. It's different now. There's definitely people in Japan who are actually really good at MVC2. We've been hearing a lot about them, and some of them, you know, I think they want to, I mean, if you know, MVC2 becomes the flashback game next year, I'm sure a lot of them will want to show up. So yeah, we'll see some good Japanese people, players. Oh, I saw this combo already. Yeah, this Gambit combo. Yeah. I saw the Gambit combo. Flashy flash. Uh, I mean, the training modes are probably really hard already because they're based off of the arcade hardware. If they were going to delay it, the only reason why I'd want them to delay it is to give us version 1 and version 2 of X-Men versus Street Fighter. But outside of that, don't really care, honestly. I mean, Gambit he has game crashes. He has one of the most famous game crashes in MVC2 history because it had to be banned from every tournament. Because basically he had this move where he jumps on the wall and then he flies off the wall, and what he does is he aims for you and spins with his staff and tries to land on you. The problem was if you actually use the snapback and launched somebody out of the game and then did that move before the next character came in, Gambit would touch the wall and he would actually try to track the other character that he snapped out, and he would just fly off the top of the screen. And then the next character would jump in, and that was it. You just waited till the time ran out. And so if you had a life lead, you could snap someone out and fly off the screen and win. So that had to be banned from MVC2. It was like one of the first things that was banned from MVC2 tournaments. But it was definitely one of the most famous ones. It's like snapback, woo, off the screen and goodbye. Yeah, I saw a video from Japan talking about the new cable tech where you hit them out of the air, but then you drop the beam down and then they fall into the beam. But it seems like you still have to DHC into, I don't know if it's only Sentinels drones or if it's anything else, but like, I don't know what the specific timing is, but it seems like what it does is then it makes the final hit of Cable's Air Hyper Viper beam unblockable, almost like because you DHC'd, it removes the proximity box off of that while Sentinel comes in, but the laser is actually still there for one extra frame or something like that. And so then basically you just fall into the beam and get hit. So, no, I mean, for sure, like, I mean, I don't know if there will be as many people to play MVC2 as Third Strike, just because MVC2 is so hard and because, you know, a lot of people are going to be like, I'm going to get into this game, and they're going to play it and be like, this game is broken, like, and not have any fun with it. I don't know if MVC2 would get as high as Third Strike, but it will probably be close, and you will have a lot of very excited people. Like, for sure, there's going to be a ton of people super, super happy to play MVC2, and it'll be fun, and it'll be hype. And I mean, if it's going to be its 25th anniversary, if the Evo staff decides not to make MVC2 a flashback game next year, they are making a big mistake. Honestly, it is a fun and easy game to pick up, but once you get to the highest levels, oh my god, like, basically, if you don't know what you're doing, you're just basically gonna die, like, instantly. It's actually kind of nuts. The game is it's pretty crazy. So, but there is a reason why everybody loves it so much, honestly. So, you know, for sure, it'll be a good time at Evo if they actually put it at Evo. So, all right, so that's all I'm gonna do here. This turned out way too long going through Harada's tweet, so actually it was a good idea that I put no other topics here. Had plenty of pre-show topics here for you guys, but very insightful information from Harada. Very interesting, and actually kind of does make a lot of things make sense, you know, from what we've seen, and you know, and how thankful that we should all be when guys like Daisuke Ishiwatari stay with Guilty Gear, right? Like, clearly, you know, one of the reasons why Daisuke sticks with it is because so much of it is so personal to him. He used to voice Soul, his best friend used to voice Zato, you know, like all the characters are related to his passion of music and stuff like that. So, you know, obviously he wants to keep working on it. And, you know, I hope that the culture of Japan has changed enough that someone like Daisuke can keep doing that. Obviously, he's in a really high position at ArcSys right now. And so, hopefully someone like that can, be considered to continue to gain advancements, gain higher salary, and continue to work on the games that way, Daisuke has definitely done a couple of other games before Guilty Gear. He did not do Blaze Blue. Blaze Blue is more of a Mori game, I think it is. Mori. Yeah, Daisuke Ishiratari did the music. He drew the sprites himself, of the original Guilty Gear. He, programmed most of the game himself, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So I did not do thumbnails, Forrest. I did not do thumbnails. So I will do thumbnails after I end the stream and come back for a little second. So... but yeah, there's a lot to be said about Japanese development. Also, with reference to the old interview that Inafune had, where he was, really not happy with the way the Japanese game industry was. And yeah, sure, maybe it turns out that Inafune was a hack or whatever like that, because Mighty Number 9 wasn't great. Who knows? Maybe he ran out of budget, and because it was a Kickstarter game. Who knows what the story is, and maybe he is a genius, but he just couldn't make the game he wanted, and then Mighty Number 9 came out bad, and that just sullied his reputation forever. I don't know. Regardless, the actual, things that he was talking about in the interview still held true, and it's evidenced by a lot of what Harada said. There's a lot of parallels between that. So it just seems like it's one of the things about this is that it's really tough to navigate the Japanese gaming industry, the gaming scene, because, the way it is now, it doesn't sound like it's as centered on game development, but now it's more corporate, organizational, climb the ladder kind of thing. So it's very interesting. Capcom tried to westernize and outsource a bunch of stuff, but Capcom is also always in a very, very different position. Because, and I am not a business person, so I can't tell you exactly why, but Capcom is still a family-owned company. There still is one person, who it's basically, it's not as corporate, because it's literally still a family-owned company out there. And that definitely has a lot of effect on how Capcom works. Again, I'm not exactly 100% sure how, because I'm not a business person at all whatsoever. But, when you read a lot of articles and stuff like that about it, they talk about that a lot, that Capcom is still owned literally by a family. So they I guess what that means is they don't have to worry about, stockholder decisions, market decisions, or something. I don't even know, does Capcom have stocks? I'm sure they do. But so, like I said, I don't know. That's all I know is I've heard that because they're family owned, that also lets them do things a lot differently. So that's all I know. Okay, so they are a public company. So there you go. So they do have public trading. Again, if somebody on YouTube knows, you can type it in the comments down below so other people can read it and find out. But yeah, very interesting insights here from Harada. Always great to hear these kind of things. And, a lot of times you just kind of wish that people would talk about these things more. A lot of companies are very secretive, or they're scared to reveal things, or, et cetera, et cetera. And, sometimes I think a lot of times this actually makes people more understanding, right? But, obviously, a lot of companies don't want to reveal this because it makes them look bad or whatever. It's because people are going to be like, Bandai Namco sucks that they wanted to take Harada off of Tekken, or they think Harada's a bad guy. You guys suck, right? So obviously a lot of companies don't want to do that. And this is one of those things that I talk about a lot, when people get mad at a fighting game for B reason. And I'm like, God, you guys probably have no idea how much goes into this and what the reason these are all being caused by. Because like I said, I totally get it. I worked at a company. I was on the automation team. Our project shipped and it got really bad reviews. They needed to blame somebody, so they blamed the automation team because we didn't check the legacy stuff good enough. So when we went to the ship party, everybody got cool gifts for working on the product except my automation team. And I almost stood up and yelled, "Fuck you," to the highest up manager that was there. I literally almost stood up and was just like, "Fuck you," and I would have stormed out of there, dude. But we got scapegoated, you know? So I know what it's like working at these stupid companies, dude. Like, shit happens, and a lot of people don't realize, you know, how much there is going on. And so, you know, it's nice to hear stories like this. You know, oftentimes we have to wait till someone gets super old and they write their tell-all book. But, you know, it's still, I think, important to learn these kind of things, so... And hope you enjoyed this podcast. And, you know, the day that this podcast graced your ears was the most important day of your life. But for me,
it was Tuesday.